welcome to Time Management for Engineering Managers, okay? And just to get an idea, like how many of you are like engineering managers? Just raise your hand. Okay, awesome. And how many of you like struggle to like find time to do everything you need to do? All right, great. So this talk is for you. So my name is Vidal, and welcome again. So this is a pretty big topic. This is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to cover different concepts in time management, talk about interruptions, emails, calendar, planning, meetings, to-dos, tips, and more tips. So I want to leave you a lot of like actionable things you can do. And I'm going to leave you with some resources and wrap up. I think we'll probably cover this in about 45 minutes or so, but we'll see. I think we have time, and we'll try to leave some time for Q&A. Yes? Yes, there will be. I will share the slides. I think they're also recording the session, so you'll get a copy. You'll be able to see that later. So yes, I will also share the slides. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So I work as an engineering manager, and I live here in the Bay Area. I've always been really interested in the topic of time management and productivity. So I had a startup for a long time, and in my startup, all we did was productivity tools. So I'm kind of like a geek about this topic, and I really love this topic. And I'm on a mission to help engineering managers and educate them about things, and so I just wanted to share with you on this topic. So let's talk about time. So of course, there's never enough time. Engineering managers are just overloaded with things usually, and it can be very overwhelming, especially for new managers. I found this to be like a constant challenge for all engineering managers and all the ones I've interviewed. So I have this side project I run called managersclub.com, and on this site, it's a blog and also now a podcast where I interview engineering leaders. I've interviewed over 80 engineering leaders, and one of the questions I ask all of them is, what is your workday like, and how do you manage your time, emails, etc.? And they're always like, oh my God, yes, let me tell you, because it's something everyone struggles with. So I'm going to share with you what I learned from speaking with these leaders. You can also read it on the site. I'm going to summarize a lot of the key things that I've personally found useful. I've learned a lot and applied them, and some personal stuff that I've just found useful in my life experience. So I think this can apply for many levels. So one, I just want to say, if you're just an engineering manager, this will help you to just get more done so you just don't drown and you can survive, your day-to-day job. If you are maybe a manager of managers, you're increasing your scope. As you have more and more stuff to do, you can't like scale your time by just brute force adding more hours. So at some point you have to become more efficient and leverage your time. And finally, if you're an individual contributor, some of these techniques will apply to you, and I'll point out where they apply, but some of them are more specific to managers. So, of course, everyone has the same amount of time. We know that. And this means even other managers, even successful managers you see, have the same amount of time as you do. So how do they do it? You're not alone if you're struggling with this problem. First concept to understand is you're not going to get everything done. There's no way. There's always going to be more demands on your time. Everyone always has more stuff to do. That's just normal, so don't stress out about that. There's a really interesting article that's been quoted to me so many times I've read it. I just recommend it to you. There's this thing, manager's schedule versus maker's schedule. There's a famous article by Paul Graham. I'll have a link to it there. I recommend you read it. But basically talks about focus time and how creators and individual contributors need a lot of focus time, but managers don't operate in that space. And it just has a really good discussion of it. One thing that's different about being an engineering leader is you also need to be very conscious of how you manage other people's time. And you can help and multiply other people's time, or you can become like an obstacle to that. So keep that in mind. During the talk, I'll also make some references to computer technology, because we all, we work in IT here, and there are a lot of things to learn and a lot of analogies you can make from computers and scheduling algorithms you can apply to your own life. Like not thrashing yourself, not bricking yourself. I'll say things like that. Avoiding excessive memory swaps, things like that. So you can actually apply some of these techniques of computer science to your own, to yourself, to your human operating system. And finally, I'll talk sometimes about Parkinson's law. For people who don't know what Parkinson's law is, it's basically that work expands to fill the amount of time allotted to it. And so a lot of managers understand this intuitively because they'll assign work and they'll give like tight deadlines to encourage people to get things done in that time, but they won't apply it to themselves necessarily. So you should try to apply Parkinson's law to yourself as well. One more concept before we go more. I just want to talk about multitasking. So there is out there this, what I call the fallacy of multitasking. It's super tempting. People think that it works, but it really doesn't. The human being is like, just has one core, and the core is not that fast. People are single-threaded. And this has actually been the subject of much research, but in summary, your IQ will go down by about 10%, if you're multitasking, doing things. And that's not good for certain kinds of work. So yes, if you're doing like expense reports or routine admin work, maybe you don't need all your IQ to do that, so that's okay. But if you're doing some very important, leadership work, you probably don't want your IQ to be down 10%. You want it to be up 10%. So try not to multitask on things that are like super important. Avoid that temptation. And in my opinion, it's just better to focus on one thing at a time and apply the 80-20 rule. You'll be surprised how often just doing 80% of the job now is better than 100% later. I want to talk a little about interruptions, okay? This is kind of an important distinction here for engineering leaders. You should learn to love internal interruptions because they're part of your job, okay? Interruptions from your team, your boss, your peers. Those are always important, and you're an unblocker. That's one of your jobs to be an engineering leader, is to unblock people. And this can be a big misunderstanding for new engineering managers because, when you're an individual contributor, you don't want to be interrupted. You want focus time. You want huge blocks of focus time to get work done. But as an engineering leader, that often is impossible and is not even desirable in many cases. Like, you need to be available. So inviting interruptions, being available to your team, often is what makes you successful as a manager. And that's one thing that's very different about being an engineering leader than an individual contributor. With that said, it's okay to be really strict, I feel, with external interruptions from third parties, from vendors, social visits, like all those things. Yeah, you can be really like hardcore about those. But if it's, again, someone from your team, like, no, like, you need to be available. And talk about emails. So people are just like swimming like in a whole sea of emails. Like, I get tons of emails and all that. So I just want to talk a little bit about email and some things I've learned about email. So when I've talked with a lot of people, a lot of really successful engineering leaders I found try to follow inbox zero, okay? This is tough, but this was introduced, I believe, in 2007 by a man named Merlin Mann, and he gave a Google tech talk. You can watch the video on YouTube where he basically explains what is inbox zero. So what is inbox zero basically? It's like, you don't leave your email client open. You only check email a couple times a day. You try to touch an email only once. Can you respond to it in 2 minutes? You respond to it in 2 minutes. You forward it. You delete it. Again, we're trying to make an analogy in computers, we're trying to process our email inbox like an order n time, not an order like n squared time, but like going through the same emails over and over again. So trying to be very efficient, trying to like empty your email box immediately. So this is a very useful technique if you can pull it off. It requires some discipline. You can schedule blocks of time. This can be very effective. You can do this, schedule a couple blocks of time a day. You're going to check email maybe in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and then just not be constantly in email, because that also can distract you and lead to a lot of mental swapping. And again, we don't want to do a lot of like swapping and thrashing of our brain. Okay. Another thing I would say is turn off alerts. So if you're always looking at alerts, like even turn off like the bubbles, that show how many messages you have, if you can do that, because it's just distracting. Certainly you don't want alerts popping up on your screen or like a new message has arrived. That can be super distracting. I'll say a couple more things is avoid what I call like texting via email. Avoid like having all these like quick emails going back to the same person. If it's really like that, just like call them or something, because you can, you know, it's just not efficient to have like use email as text, I find. And then finally, just understand when you're in your email, one of the major things you should look at is, can I unblock anyone or another team? Because as an engineering leader, like one email in there might be blocking someone in your team from getting their work done. It could be blocking an entire org, okay? So like one of the first things, a real power tip is when you're going through your email, is there anything there where you can just unblock someone? Because there's a leader, you can be cognizant, again, of other people's time. So look for that in particular. I'll say a little bit more about emails. So what I found useful is to really make a lot of use of filters and rules. Because you can set this up in Gmail, you can set this up in different email clients. So these are some filters and rules that I find useful, which I think are very, just help you be more efficient in email. One is emails addressed only to you, okay, or your name. So like if you send an email just to me, like I noticed that because like no one else is going to respond to that thread. So emails from your manager or your manager's manager, obviously super important for many reasons, you know, so those immediately flag. Emails from anyone on my team or peers, I'll flag those. Any email with action required, invitation to edit or comment on a document, often that is important. Emails about code reviews, alerts, outages, obviously also is important. But then other emails like newsletters, different automated emails, so I'll down level those. So those you can just have rules to file them in different folders, and you can look at those later to kind of declutter your inbox somewhat. And then finally, if you're just totally buried in email, you can declare email bankruptcy and just start over. And you'll be surprised if you declare email bankruptcy, like if something's really important, people will email you about it again, or they'll call you. So that actually can work in extreme cases. We'll talk about calendar. So engineering leaders like live in their calendar, many of them. You know, you have lots of meetings. So I just want to say that calendar, whatever happens to calendar is not your enemy. It's a tool, okay? And I understand it at everywhere, most every company, I'll just say, calendars are open. So you can quickly find someone and you can like add something to their calendar and invite them. And that's like so tempting. So people can abuse that. So you have to like defend your calendar, you know? So how are we going to do that? We'll talk about that. I would say one tip is first scan your calendar first thing in the morning. What meetings can I skip? Can I cancel? Can I, you know, the meeting not have an agenda? You know, is it clear, you know, I really need to be there? That's one way to defend yourself. Defragging your calendar. I find this very useful. What I'll do is if I have my day like broken up with like meeting here, and then there's 30 minutes, and there's another meeting there, and then there's 15 minutes, and another meeting. Is there any way I can kind of defrag these, put them together, especially if maybe there's two different meetings where, you know, even if I've called it and there's like an overlap, you know, with maybe the attendees, maybe you have like back-to-back meetings, so maybe we have a, you know, a planning meeting, and then after that there's some kind of meeting that also talks similarly about the topic. If you can kind of put like things together, that can help. One example of that is, for example, one-on-ones. If I kind of get in one-on-one mode, maybe I'll put like 3 one-on-ones like right back to back. I don't like to put more than 3 because I think you can kind of, that's like too much. But if you can kind of group meetings by different buckets or attendees, that can help. So defragging can also then open up some of your time and kind of avoid also context switching and stuff. So I think that's very useful. Another thing you can do is you can have themes by day. So for example, maybe Mondays is the day you do one-on-ones, or Tuesdays is the day you do one-on-ones, and then maybe Tuesdays or Wednesdays you do some other thing. And so that way, again, you're kind of avoiding context switching, you're bucketing stuff, and it's kind of nice. And one thing I also personally like about putting one-on-ones early in the week is that if they need to be rescheduled, you still have the rest of the week to do it. Like Friday is kind of a bad day to schedule one-on-ones because if something happens then, you've kind of missed the week. So some kind of meetings are better at the beginning of the week. Planning meetings, obviously, at the beginning of the week are better than at the end of the week. So again, consistent with like not bricking yourself, I would say put planned breaks for unplanned work. So there's always going to be unplanned work, so add some do not schedule blocks in your calendar. If you can, maybe at least preserve 30 minutes a day or 60 minutes a day for who knows what's going to happen that day. But if you have no spare capacity, then you're basically bricked, because if something happens, now you have a problem. And one more thing I would say in calendar is, if you can, try to prep for the next day's meetings, maybe one day ahead. That can be very useful to just look at what's going to happen the next day, so you can prep for it, review any documents, attachments, agendas, so you can come well prepared to the meeting, as opposed to try to like look at your calendar and say, oh man, there's like this thing in like 30 minutes and I'm not prepared. So that could be a useful technique. I'll say a little bit more on calendar because it's so important. I actually have more meetings after this too. What I would say is it's totally fine to decline a meeting and send a representative. And this is a great thing you can do as an engineering leader, because this can be a learning opportunity for someone on your staff. You can say, you know, like here's a learning and development opportunity. I'm going to send, you know, can you please represent us at this meeting and report back? And that way you don't have to go, they can learn. And often, sometimes, someone just wants at their meeting some subject matter expert or someone just to represent the team. That doesn't necessarily have to be you. So this is one way you can free up time, is by sending delegates where possible. Many companies declare no meeting days. No meeting Wednesday is very popular, but it can be any day of the week. A day where people can do focus work. Doesn't always apply to engineering managers because they end up, you know, having meetings all the time. But a no meeting day can be useful. And even in those cases, I'll find engineering managers have less meetings on the no meeting days than that they don't. I like to color code my calendar. I think using color coding is really useful. So I'll color like recruiting meetings, certain kind of color, one-on-one meetings, a different kind of color, you know, meetings with, you know, different kind of people, different colors. So that makes it very easy to scan, and also helps when you're defragging to see like, hey, can I put all the yellow meetings together, all the green meetings together, the blue meetings together? It just find it like super useful. So I really like to use color coding a lot. And then one more thing I'll say is set meetings with yourself to get work done, okay? So you can set a meeting with yourself or to check in with people. And often this is really good to do 2 or more weeks out. Because if you look at your calendar for this week, it's probably already full of stuff. And if you look at next week, it's probably also kind of full. But if you look at your calendar 2 or 3 weeks out, usually it's not so full. So that's a good place to go, you know, in 2 or 3 weeks, put stuff there. And that's useful. And I guess one more thing I'd say on that, which someone told me, which I think is very interesting, is if somebody sends you a meeting request for something that's like a couple weeks out, you know, hey, I want to invite you. So it's very easy to accept these kind of meetings that are 2 weeks in the future, 3 weeks, because you're not really thinking about that so much, right? But if someone were to invite you to that same meeting and it was today or tomorrow, would you go? And if you wouldn't, why would you accept it in the future? So think about that. Think about your future self, and not like, you know, I mean, what difference does it make, right? I'll talk a little bit about planning. Here I mean like personal planning, not like, you know, planning for your team. But I think what can be useful here is to consider using some kind of asset allocation strategy. So what do I mean by that? Is like thinking, how much time do I want to spend on different kind of activities? For example, recruiting. A lot of engineering managers need to spend 20% of their time on recruiting, or maybe 50%, depending on what's going on with your company and what stage you're at, and what the expectations are. So if you've been told, I need you to spend 50% of your time on recruiting, I need to spend 20% of time on this, I need to spend 30% of my time on something else, like actually come up with a time allocation strategy like that, and see if your meetings and stuff you're doing like fit into that. That can be very useful rather than just leaving it just to whims. So come up with a time allocation strategy, and you can make a map of this And then what's really useful is either a lot of people do this on Friday, if they have time, like end of the week Friday, they'll kind of review their past week. That's very useful. I do that. Or if you're kind of too tired for that, you can do it Sunday. You can kind of retrospect back on the previous week as you plan the next week. So having your own little personal retrospective of how you used your week can be very useful so you can improve your time utilization going forward. Let me talk about meetings now. So meetings are often, they can be up to 80% of a manager's time. It can be anywhere from 50 to 80%. Just meetings are just a lot that you have to do. They're your main work. So I think what you should do is learn to love meetings because you're going to be in there anyway. So why are you going to suffer, by saying I don't like meetings? Because you're going to be there anyway. So you might as well learn to love them. So if you're going to love meetings, you should learn to run effective meetings and be really good at running meetings and be a role model for your organization as to what good meetings are. Have meetings with agendas, action items, meeting notes that run on time, start on time. And, one person even told me, many people told me this, if there's no notes, so there's no action items for a meeting, the meeting didn't even happen. Why are we having this meeting? So always make sure when you're leaving the meeting, what are the action items, what's going on? It's sometimes hard to influence other people to have great meetings, but if you have really good meetings, one, you can save your own time, your team's time, because you can be responsible for how they use their time, and you can be a role model to others in your org as to how meetings should be run efficiently. So I think that is super important to do. It's great if you can end meetings early and return time to people. People love that. Whenever I say, oh, this meeting is like an hour, but oh, we're done in 35 minutes, you can have, I'm returning to you 25 minutes. People love that, so that's a great way to get happy people. Going back to Parkinson's law, I think it's important to keep meetings as short as possible. If you schedule a meeting for an hour, I've been to many meetings where people schedule a meeting for an hour, and you know what? It takes the whole hour. Surprise, because the discussion will just expand to fill that amount of time. So if you can time box the meeting, okay, shorter, then you'll just see sometimes the work just gets done. I mean, I've been at many meetings where we kind of reached a decision at 40 minutes, and then for the next 20 minutes, people were just talking about stuff. So just because the meetings are half hour to an hour, typically, if you can get it done shorter, do that, okay? One thing I like to do at meetings is ask for laptops down. So if you have a meeting where everyone has their laptop open, they're checking email, then they're not listening. The meeting is already kind of not effective. And if you go to someone else's meeting, I'll notice how many people have their laptops up and are doing stuff. If a lot of people have their laptops up and all this, this meeting is not an effective meeting. You can see what is going on here. So meetings should be laptops down. People should be focused on what's going on. And if they can't do that because the topic is whatever, it's not being run well, then that kind of highlights that. So I think laptops down is really a great rule. I like to send surveys after my meetings to improve them. So I'll send quick little Google Form surveys. It's really easy to do. Have people rate the meeting. Was this meeting a good use of time? Do you have ideas to improve them? And often people will give you feedback to improve your own meetings, which I find very useful. So I think that's a really good technique. One more thing I'll say is sometimes you can avoid meetings entirely by writing. Okay, but what I mean by writing over talking. By writing over talking is collaborating on a shared document. This is something I was recently working at Uber, and Uber is really big in this culture of documents. And so people say, why are we going to have this meeting? Why don't we just put out this proposal, send out a shared Google document, everyone comment on the document, iterate on the document, and then, okay, maybe we'll have a meeting later, but sometimes a lot of the discussions can be done in writing rather than even calling a meeting. So if that works in your organization, if people are good, of course, it requires people to be good writers and to be into writing, and not everyone is into writing. Some people prefer to talk. But anyway, that can be very useful to replace a meeting with a shared document.
Now, I started at 9:17, so the meeting start time, and then people actually came on time, and I absolutely started on time. And that really made a difference.
I think that's great. I actually remember doing this one time. I used to have a stand-up, and I ran it at I think 9:03 or 9:08. Because the other thing is people would remember that time, because it's unusual, So I like that hack about starting at an odd minute. All right, back to the presentation. So no talk about time management would be incomplete without mentioning the Eisenhower Matrix. And I want to talk about this before we talk about to-dos. This is called like 4 quadrants. It was popularized by Stephen Covey, but I think it was originally mentioned by General Eisenhower. But basically, a lot of you have probably seen this. There's 4 quadrants. You have things that are urgent and important, not urgent and important, urgent and not important, and not urgent and not important. And so basically, you have to do stuff in quadrant 1. There's no choice about quadrant 1. People often get sucked into quadrant 4, which is kind of the potato chips of work. You know, maybe this one's kind of fun and easy to do, but doesn't really satisfy anyone. So what I did is I made a slightly different version of this. I call this the EM version, Engineering Manager version. So I've added, for example, examples of things that are urgent and important. So of course you have crises, firefighting, processing problems, but I had like interviews, internal interruptions. So internal interruptions, as we mentioned, is a key part of your job, and it's very important. Over here, this is the quadrant where you should try to spend a lot of your time, which often can be hard when you're under time pressure and stress, is the not urgent but very important. So here, classically, in the 4 quadrants, you have prevention, capacity improvements, etc. I added for engineering leaders, recruiting, one-on-ones. You can setting vision, long-term planning. These are things you can do there. In quadrant 3, this stuff, I added external interruptions, where you can be more strict with those. So anyway, you'll have this in the slides. Okay, so then on to to-dos. So now that we've talked about, we want to do stuff that's urgent, we have to do stuff that's urgent and important, and we want to do stuff that's important but not urgent. How do we approach that? So most engineering managers I talk to will create a daily to-do list of the maybe top 1 to 3 things that they want to accomplish, maybe for the week, maybe the top 5 things they want to do. What I'll do is I keep a stack of 3x5 index cards on my desk. And each day I'll take like a little index card and I'll just write like a couple quick things I really want to get done that day. And then at the end of the day, I'll look that I get these things done, okay? I just think it's nice to have it like just on a small card or something. To-do list apps are very popular. So a lot of people recommend to me all kind of to-do list apps, and you can go online in the App Store and you can find a lot of them. But I'll say a couple things about to-do lists because I've used a lot of to-do lists. And one is, to-do lists don't have a sense of time. So yes, you can have a huge to-do list of stuff, but unless the task is a very small task, you really should put it on your calendar. Because otherwise, when are you going to get this done? So that's one challenge with to-do lists. To-do lists can also be very super overwhelming, and I'll talk about that in a minute. One thing I like over to-do lists is I like to create checklists. So I have my own daily and weekly checklists that I run. And so I'll just put the different things I need just to check on, right? I need to check on these different metrics the team has. I need to check on, each individual. Have I checked in with them? Like a whole checklist I think would be very useful to run. So I do those things so things don't slip through the cracks. So now I'll go back to to-do lists. So I think one of the challenges again with to-do lists is a really long to-do list can be stressful. It's so easy to add stuff to a to-do list, but to actually get it done is not so easy. It takes 2 seconds to add it and it can be hours to get the task done, and it can be very frustrating. So I actually kind of gave up on to-do lists personally because I just found things don't get done. So what I use instead is a personal Kanban board, and I find this so much better. So for some of you who have studied Agile, and you have a task board. So Kanban board is a task board, and I just love this. So I'm going to show you, this is what my personal Kanban board looks like, okay? I've just grayed out the items. So one, I use color coding on my personal Kanban board. That's super useful. And so look at the columns that I've created, right? So I have, so it's not my backlog or stuff to do. It's just options. These are things I could do with my time, and I put in here, is it still worth doing? Because you have to prune it. Because this will just accumulate and accumulate infinite number of things that people ask you to do. So I'm always looking at it, is it still worth doing? Is that the best use of my time? So I have that. So then I have my list of stuff for today, okay? So this is the stuff I want to do today. what I'm doing. Oh, and another benefit of Kanban boards is you have work in progress limits. Okay, so this is another key thing, right? You know I'm only going to do like 2, 3 things today. I mean, I could say I'm going to do 10 things, but in reality I'm not. So I'm just going to stress myself out and fail. So what are really the 3 things I'm going to do that day, or 4 things? So I'll have a column for today. Okay, then like what I'm actually doing, I have a doing column. Okay, I love this column, waiting. Okay, so I'm doing something and now I'm blocked waiting for someone or something. I'll just move that little ticket of mine into the waiting column. Well, that's beautiful because now now I'm not stressing about it. It's still there. I'm tracking it. And then what I do periodically is I just walk down the column of stuff that I'm waiting for, right? Like, okay, I look there, oh, this is still outstanding. I still haven't heard from this person. I still haven't gotten this document. I still haven't gotten approval on whatever. Okay, I just walk down the waiting column, pinging, checking on what's going on. If someone comes and says, hey, what happened with X? I'm like, I'm waiting on it, right here, boom. That's where it is. So a waiting column is beautiful. Like a straight to-do list doesn't have these capabilities, which I really love about Kanban boards. And the final one, which I love, is the done column. Because then, that gives me, like, hey, this is stuff I actually got done, And I can go back and I can look at, what did you even do this week? Okay, well, these are all the things I got done. So using a personal Kanban board, I think, is way, way better. This is my big power tip for you over a to-do list. So I really like that.
What's the color codes for?
At different categories of things I might have. So one color I use, if it's something that like my manager asked me to do, it's red. So those tasks I know, I don't lose track of those. Let's see, tips and ideas. Here I'm just going to share, this is kind of a list of just like other miscellaneous tips and ideas I got from people. One that's very, very popular is get in early before everyone else and things get busy. So many engineering managers I talk to, my team doesn't get in till like 9 or 10, so I get in like an hour or 2 early before there's any meetings and I get stuff done. That's a very popular technique. If you can do that, that's great. And then hopefully you can kind of leave at a more normal time and have like some work-life balance, so that's helpful. Now, the alternative, somebody told me to do something totally opposite, which I tried, and it's kind of interesting too, is maybe just work late one night a week. So one person I talked to said, what I do is I stay late on Mondays. So I get to start off the week really strong, I build a lot of momentum, and I have a bunch of people on my team who are night owls, and they like to stay late, they come late, they stay late. So at least that one day a week, I can hang out with them and see like what's going on. So that's an interesting idea to maybe, pick one night a week that you're going to stay late intentionally, okay? And I think Mondays is good for that because, again, you can start the week off strong. Okay. One thing here's another thing, is whenever you're looking at what to do in all your list of options and to-dos, is think like, what's the most important thing I can do that maybe no one else can do on the team, that no one else is able to do? Because you've been hired as the manager, so you have certain skills and capabilities that maybe other members of the team don't have. So what are things there that only you can do that maybe no one else can do, and then focus on those. Like I said in calendaring, try to leave at least 30 minutes a day unscheduled so you're not bricked if something unexpected happens, and something always will happen. A lot of people I talk with, and I believe in this too, doing exercise, meditation can help you keep your energy if you can find time for that. Try to take advantage of your time while you're commuting. If you can like listen to audiobooks, podcasts, there's so much you can learn. There's so many great books, and I'll recommend some to you in a moment. So just try to like make use of that time. Some other miscellaneous tips here. Become a faster typer. So a lot of what engineering managers do is in writing. So if you can write faster, you can gain some time. So learn to become a fast typer. Get a kind of autocomplete application like Text Expander, so you can just type abbreviations and boom, things get filled out. If you need to, leave your desk. Book a conference room to work on something with focus. Like if you need to write performance reviews, go do that, so you can have time to focus, because you need everything for that. Another thing, studies have found like you're most productive in the first 2 or 4 hours after you wake up. So try not to squander that time with like administrative stuff, routine stuff. I like to leave that stuff either for the end of the day, maybe when I'm more tired, or maybe even have a day just for that. But in the morning, when your brain is very fresh and you have a lot of energy, like what's like a maybe creative, deep work, strategizing stuff you have to do is a good thing. And try not to get immediately sucked into email or calendars the first thing. Some people I talk to, what they do is like the first hour, they don't even open their email or calendar, because the minute they open it, then just get, you know, sucked into someone else's agenda. You know, I think that, what did someone say? I think like, you know, putting a calendar invite or email to someone is basically putting a to-do on someone else, you know, and they don't want anyone else's to-dos on them. I think it's important to get things out of your head. So there's something from Getting Things Done, this book like by David Allen. So create a capture system. Make sure you get things out of your head. So I carry paper notebooks. I use Evernote. I have my personal Kanban board. It can be just very stress-inducing to have stuff floating around, reminders in your own brain. So don't do that. Capture everything in some other system. Here's some classic books on time management I love reading. So these are some that I personally found useful. So one is Getting Things Done by David Allen. This is a very classic book on time management. When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. This is a very interesting book on best time of the day to do certain tasks. I love the Checklist Manifesto because I'm really big on checklists. I create lots of checklists for myself. There's a book on personal Kanban, the person who created personal Kanban, which I find very useful. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is the book by Stephen Covey that talks about the 4 quadrants specifically. And there's a new book I was reading on the surprising science of meetings. So there's a lot of really interesting things here about when agendas are useful and when they're not. So again, since you're going to be living in meetings and you want to be like a meeting superstar, you know, like I think this is useful information to run your meetings very well. So anyway, time's up. So I'll just wrap up here. I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming out. And this is my contact information. You can reach me on Twitter. That's my personal email address. I'll post a copy of this deck on my site. I think the conference also will, it'll be posted there too. There's an older version of this talk there now, but this is an updated version of the deck. So I will post that soon. And we have a little bit of time. We already did some Q&A, but if you have any other Q&A, happy to take it.